trust she had begun to build was a double-edged sword, and she knew the coming days would test every ounce of her resolve. With a final glance toward the sleeping town, Clara stepped back inside. Tomorrow, the search for truth would continue, and with it, the delicate dance between revelation and ruin. The hollow promise was still alive, and so was the danger it carried. The question was, who would pay the price when it finally shattered? Detective Clara Hayes moved carefully along the narrow path skirting the edge of town, her boots crunching softly on a carpet of brittle leaves and pine needles. She had insisted on walking alone despite Deputy Sam Collins' protests, a habit born from years of solitary reflection. A way to process the heavy weight of her investigations. Her breath formed small clouds in the cold air, mingling with the faint scent of damp earth and wood smoke from distant chimneys. The town below twinkled faintly, a cluster of amber lights caught in the valley's embrace. It was peaceful, or so it seemed. Clara's mind churned with the fragments of the case. The mayor's disappearance, the hollow promise binding every resident, the veiled threats that had begun to shadow her steps. She'd sensed the growing unease in the town's atmosphere, but nothing had prepared her for what came next. Without warning, a dark figure lunged from behind a gnarled pine, shattering the stillness. Clara barely had time to react before a violent blow sent her sprawling onto the leaf-strewn ground. Pain exploded along her side as she struggled to push her attacker away, her heart hammering in a frantic rhythm. "Who's there?" she gasped, trying to scramble upright, but the assailant was relentless, a blur of shadow and fury. The cold mountain air bit into her skin as she fought for breath, the world tilting dangerously. Her attacker's grip tightened, a rough hand clamping over her mouth to stifle her cries. Panic surged through her veins, sharp and icy. Yet beneath the fear, a stubborn resolve flared. She would not be silenced, not by threats, not by violence. Suddenly, a shout pierced the night. "Clara, hold on." The heavy footsteps of Deputy Sam Collins thundered through the underbrush, followed by Maggie Thornton's sharp voice. The assailant hesitated, the moment fractured by the arrival of reinforcements. Sam's hand flashed out, a solid strike that sent the attacker staggering backward into the shadows. Maggie's steady presence beside Sam was a bomb, her keen eyes scanning the darkness for any further threat. "Are you okay?" Sam asked urgently, his voice rough with concern as he helped Clara to her feet. She nodded weakly, wincing as pain radiated from her side. "I'm fine, just shaken." Back at the inn, the warmth of the fire was a stark contrast to the cold terror of the attack. Clara sat wrapped in a thick blanket, the crackling flames casting flickering shadows across her face. Around her, the low murmur of voices held a tension that betrayed the town's fragile calm. Maggie poured a cup of tea, setting it gently before Clara. "You're stirring up more than dust." "Detective," she said quietly, eyes reflecting a mixture of fear and resignation. "Some secrets aren't meant to see the light." Clara met her gaze steadily. "Then it's all the more reason to find the truth." The attack was a brutal reminder that the hollow promise was not just a metaphor, it was a weapon wielded by those desperate to maintain control. The town's silence was enforced with threats and violence, a shadowy web that Clara was now deeply entangled in. As dawn approached, Clara's mind raced with questions. Who had sent the attacker? Was it one of the town elders, desperate to protect their legacy? Or someone else, lurking in the shadows with their own agenda? The stakes had never been higher. Every step forward risked the wrath of unseen enemies. Yet Clara's determination only hardened. She would uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The echoes of the threat would haunt Herb. They would not break her. Outside, the mountain wind whispered through the pines, carrying with it the weight of secrets long buried and the promise of reckoning to come. And somewhere in the darkness, eyes watched and waited. The game had changed. The hollow promise was no longer just a mystery to solve, it was a danger to survive. Clara's resolve was tested like never before. She would have to navigate the treacherous path ahead with courage, cunning, and the unyielding will to shine light into the town's darkest corners. The night had spoken, and Clara was listening. The room was silent save for the occasional creak of old wood and the soft rustle of pages turning. The yellowed paper smelled of age and secrecy. The ink faded but still readable. Clara's eyes scanned each line carefully, her mind racing to piece together the mayor's true intentions. Mayor Elias Moreau's handwriting was meticulous, each entry a careful construction of thoughts and justifications. Clara's heart pounded as she read passages that revealed more than just a man's diary. They exposed the foundation of a pact that had bound the town for decades. The mayor wrote candidly about promises made in shadows, about how the town's prosperity was secured not through open governance but through fear, a hollow promise that demanded silence and obedience. She leaned back in her chair, the weight of the discovery sinking in. The pact was no mere agreement. It was a mechanism of control. The residents had traded their autonomy for safety, bound by oaths that were never meant to be broken. And now, with the mayor vanished, that fragile order was unraveling. Later that evening, Clara found herself in the back room of Maggie Thornton's. The air was thick with the scent of aged wood and lingering smoke from the hearth. Maggie sat across from her, eyes sharp but shadowed with decades of guarded pain. The flicker of candlelight cast dancing shadows on the rough walls. "You want to know what that promise really was?" Maggie said quietly, her voice heavy with regret. "It wasn't about protection alone. It was about keeping us all in line. Fear was the leash, and the mayor held it tight." Clara listened, absorbing the reluctant truths. Maggie's words confirmed the journal's revelations. The pact was a tool wielded not just to protect, but to manipulate. The mayor had fostered a culture of silence, where loyalty was enforced by the threat of exposure and ruin. The next day, the tension in town was palpable. Clara met Deputy Sam Collins outside the town hall, the rain soaking through their coats. His face was etched with conflict, the lines of loyalty and doubt battling openly in his eyes. "You're stirring things that have been buried for a reason," Sam said, voice low and urgent. "This town's built on that promise. Tear it apart, and everything falls apart. You have to think about what that means for all of us." Thunder rumbled overhead, mirroring the storm raging within Sam. Clara met his gaze steadily, knowing that the path ahead was fraught with danger, not only for the town but for herself. Seeking solace, Clara later visited the quiet sanctuary of the town's church. Sunlight poured through the stained glass, coloring the pews in hues of red, blue, and gold. Father James stood by the altar, his presence calm and steady. "Sometimes," he said softly, "truth is a heavy burden, Clara, but it's also the light that can guide us out of darkness." His words offered a brief reprieve from the chaos. Here, amid the prayers and echoes of faith, Clara found a moment of clarity and the strength to carry on. As the chapter closed, Clara sat once more with the journal, the mayor's words etched into her memory. The hollow promise was no longer a secret. It was a challenge, a riddle demanding resolution. The town's fragile peace was shattered, and the cost of uncovering the truth was only just beginning to reveal itself. She knew one thing for certain: exposing the hollow promise would change everything, and nothing in the mountain town would ever be the same again. The question that haunted her was clear. How far would the town go to protect the lie? And what price would she pay to see justice done? The storm outside had yet to pass. Clara Hayes sat at a battered wooden desk, her fingers tracing the edges of a faded photograph of Elias Marrow in his younger days tour. Stern, yet with a hint of warmth in his eyes. Around her, the walls were lined with sepia-toned images of the mountain town's past, each frame a piece of the puzzle she was desperate to solve. The mayor's personal effects lay scattered, brittle letters, a worn, leather-bound journal, and a collection of notes scribbled in a tight, deliberate hand. As Clara sifted through the documents, the layers of Elias Marrow's character began to emerge, an intricate tapestry woven with threads of protection and control. Maggie Thornton's guarded insights echoed in her mind. The mayor had been a pillar, a shield for the town against external threats, but that shield came with a price. The secret agreements, the whispered promises, they were more than just pacts. They were chains binding the town in silence. The room's heavy curtains muted the afternoon light, casting long shadows that seemed to flicker like ghosts on the walls. Clara's breath caught as she found a letter addressed to town elders, its tone both commanding and conciliatory, revealing the mayor's delicate balancing act between leadership and manipulation. He spoke of safeguarding traditions and maintaining order, but beneath the surface lay a clear message. Obedience was not optional. Later that evening, Clara sought Father James at the small stone church perched on the hill overlooking the town. The priest welcomed her into the quiet sanctuary, the scent of incense mingling with the earthy chill of the mountain air. Rain pattered softly against the stained glass windows, casting kaleidoscopic colors onto the worn pews. Father James's voice was low and steady as he spoke of Elias Marrow's burden, the loneliness of leadership and the moral compromises it demanded. He carried the weight of the town on his shoulders, Father James said, his eyes reflecting a mixture of sorrow and respect. But sometimes, the weight bends the bearer in ways no one else sees. Clara nodded, feeling the truth of those words resonate deep within her. Leadership, she realized, was a double-edged sword, capable of protection, yet equally capable of oppression. The next morning brought a confrontation Clara had anticipated, yet dreaded. In the mayor's old study, a room heavy with the scent of polished wood and aged leather, she faced Ellen Moreau. The mayor's estranged daughter was a study in restrained anger, her sharp features softened only by the fatigue etched beneath her eyes. Ellen's voice was brittle as she challenged Clara's assumptions. "You think you can understand him," Ellen said, her gaze piercing, "but you don't see the man behind the mask. He loved this town, yes, but his love came wrapped in secrets and shadows." Their exchange crackled with tension, each word a carefully aimed arrow. Clara felt the weight of Ellen's pain, a legacy of resentment that complicated the straightforward pursuit of truth. It was clear that the mayor's shadow stretched far beyond his absence, casting doubt and discord. Later that day, Clara met with Deputy Sam Collins in the back room of the sheriff's office. The flickering fluorescent light overhead cast long, shifting shadows as Sam hesitated before producing a hidden ledger, its worn cover cracked and edges frayed. The pages detailed transactions, favors, and obligations, ledger of control and influence that Elias Marrow had meticulously maintained. "This is the backbone of his power," Sam muttered, voice low. "Not just the promises, but the debts he kept." Clara's heart quickened as she realized the full extent of the mayor's reach. He had been more than a leader. He was a master of the unspoken rules, weaving a web that ensnared every resident in a delicate balance of fear and loyalty. As the day waned, Clara sat alone once more, surrounded by the relics of a man both protector and manipulator. The unease that had settled in her chest deepened them, just for the mystery she sought to unravel, but for the town itself, caught in the lingering shadow of Elias Marrow. Her resolve hardened. Uncovering the truth would come at a steep price, but the town deserved no less. And yet, as night fell over the mountain peaks, a question lingered in Clara's mind, echoing through the silence. How could one man bear such a burden without breaking, and at what cost had the town paid for his protection? The mayor's shadow was long, and Clara knew that stepping into it meant confronting not just a vanished leader, but the very soul of the community. The answers lay deeper still, and the journey was far from over. But for now, the room grew colder, the light dimmer, and Clara's thoughts turned the fragile line between justice and vengeance, a line she would soon have to cross. Clara Hayes stood at the center of the room, her gaze steady despite the swirling tension. Around her, the town's elders, those who had long held the reins of power, sat uneasily, their faces drawn tight with suspicion and unease. The silence was heavy, broken only by the occasional creak of old wood and the distant howl of wind rattling the mountain windows. Clara's voice cut through the quiet with measured precision. "I've gathered enough evidence to show that the mayor's hollow promise wasn't just an agreement to protect the town, it was a mechanism of control, manipulation, and betrayal. And those who upheld it did so at a personal cost to their own integrity." Maggie Thornton, seated near the far wall, shifted uncomfortably. Her weathered hands clenched and unclenched, the flickering candlelight casting shadows across her lined face. "I didn't want it to come to this," she murmured, her voice heavy with regret. "But for years, I kept secrets to protect this town, and maybe myself." The room stirred. Deputy Sam Collins, standing with a rigid posture near the entrance, swallowed hard. His loyalty to the town was palpable, but Clara saw the conflict writ large on his face, the battle between duty and truth. "We all made choices," he said quietly, eyes flicking nervously between Clara and the elders. "Some harder than others." Ellen Marrow, the mayor's estranged daughter, stepped forward, her voice sharp and raw. "You speak of choices," she said, voice trembling with a mix of anger and sorrow, "but what about the betrayal? My father trusted you all. You sacrificed his legacy and ours for your own gain." Clara watched as the room fractured, alliances cracking under the weight of exposed secrets. The mayor's disappearance, once shrouded in mystery, now revealed a web of personal betrayals that had kept the town bound in silence. Each revelation peeled back another layer of the town's carefully constructed facade, exposing the cost of the hollow promise. The elders exchanged glances, some defensive, others resigned. The unease in the room thickened, but Clara felt a grim satisfaction. This confrontation was necessary, a reckoning long overdue. It was the point of no return. As the meeting broke into heated whispers and accusations, Clara took mental notes, her determination hardening. The truth was out, but at what cost? And who, in this tangled web of lies and loyalties, would pay the ultimate price? The night outside deepened, shadows stretching long over the mountain town. Inside, the fragile peace was shattered, and Clara knew the final act of this dark story was fast approaching. The lines of betrayal had been drawn, and no one would emerge unscathed. With a steady breath, Clara prepared for what was to come, understanding that in revealing the layers of deception, she had ignited a fire that could consume them all. The mayor's hollow promise was broken, but the consequences of its undoing were only beginning to unfold. Her eyes scanned the room one last time before stepping into the cold night. The mountain air was sharp and biting, but Clara felt the heat of the battle ahead. The truth was a double-edged sword, and she carried it now, ready to wield it, no matter the cost. Deputy Sam Collins sat alone at his desk, the dim glow of a flickering fluorescent light casting long shadows across the cluttered room. Outside, the mountain town of Eldridge seemed to hold its breath, wrapped in a thick fog that blurred the edges of the world and the lines between right and wrong. Sam's fingers trembled slightly as he reached for the phone. The weight of his decision pressed down on him like the storm raging beyond the walls. For months, he had been caught between loyalty to his hometown and the gnawing truth that the town's leaders, those he had grown up respecting, were keeping secrets that threatened to destroy everything. Clara Hayes, with her relentless questions and piercing gaze, had shaken the fragile calm. She was an outsider, yes, but also a beacon of something the town desperately needed: the truth. His breath hitched as he dialed. The line rang once, twice, and then a voice answered, calm but wary. "Clara, Sam," she said softly. "I was hoping you'd call." The conversation that followed was hushed, a careful dance of words and pauses. Sam revealed what Head learned about the mayor's closest advisors, the secret meetings held behind closed doors, and the threats whispered in the dark. Each detail chipped away at the veneer of small-town harmony. Later that night, in the low light of the local diner, the two met face to face. The air was thick with the scent of coffee and fried food, but beneath it lay a heavier tension. Clara's eyes searched Sam's face, seeking reassurance amidst the uncertainty. "Why now?" she asked quietly. Sam looked away, hands clenched on the table. "Because I can't live with the lies anymore. Not when what's at stake is this town's soul." Their whispered conversation was interrupted by the creak of the door and a sharp voice. "Sam, you're making a mistake." Maggie Thornton stepped into the booth's shadows, her keen eyes burning with a mixture of fear and fury. "You don't understand what you're risking. The town needs that silence to survive." Sam's jaw tightened. Maybe it needs the truth more. Maggie's expression faltered, the years of guarding secrets weighing down her shoulders. "Think of what you're throwing away." Sam shook his head and rose, the resolve in his stance unmistakable. "I think I've already lost too much." The next morning, Sam stood alone on a rocky overlook, the mountain horizon ablaze with the first light of dawn. The chill air bit at his skin, but it was nothing compared to the cold dread settled in his chest. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with danger and betrayal, yet beneath it all, a steady flame of hope flickered. He whispered into the wind, for Eldridge, for the truth. As the sun climbed higher, casting away the night's shadows, Sam knew that his choice would change everything. The town's fragile silence was breaking, and with it, the hollow promise that had bound them all. But would the town survive the reckoning to come? The crossroads of conscience had been reached, and there was no turning back. The rain's relentless tapping mirrored the storm raging inside Sam's mind as he debated the perilous path before him. Every ally turned adversary, every secret revealed, was a step further from the life he knew and closer to an uncertain future. Clara's persistence was a beacon but also a threat to the delicate balance the town had maintained for decades. He thought of Mayor Elias Marrow, the man who had forged the promise that both protected and imprisoned Eldridge. Sam's loyalty had once been unshakable, but the mayor's disappearance had shattered that illusion, exposing a web of control and fear. In the dimly lit diner, Clara's steady voice gave him strength. "We can't let fear dictate the truth, Sam. You're not alone in this." Her words stirred something deep within him, a mixture of hope and dread. Could the town rise above its legacy of silence, or would the broken oaths doom them all? Maggie's confrontation had been a stark reminder of what was at stake. The town's history was woven with secrets, and some were desperate to keep it that way. Yet Sam's conscience refused to let him turn back. Standing at the overlook, the vast mountains stretched before him, majestic yet indifferent. They had witnessed the town's promises and betrayals, the whispered fears and shouted lies. Now, they bore witness to a choice that would define Eldridge's future. Sam exhaled slowly, the cold air steadying his resolve. No more silence, he vowed. The hollow promise was unraveling, and with it, the fragile peace of the mountain town. But in the shadows of betrayal, a new dawn was breaking, uncertain, fragile, but real. And Detective Clara Hayes was ready to face whatever came next. The chapter closes on Sam's solitary figure silhouetted against the rising sun, the mountain breeze carrying the whispers of a town on the edge of transformation. The choices made today would echo through Eldridge's future, challenging the very foundations of trust and power. The crossroads had been reached. The question now was what path the town would take, toward redemption or ruin, and Clara's pursuit of truth had never been more urgent. Detective Clara Hayes stepped inside, her breath visible in the chill that clung to the air, mingling with the faint scent of aged wood and dust. The room was dimly lit by a single overhead lamp, casting long shadows that danced across the paneled walls, each marking the passage of time and the secrets held within. The elders had arrived, one by one, their footsteps muted but laden with the weight of unspoken fears. Clara watched as their faces, etched with the lines of years spent guarding the town's darkest truths, hardened into expressions of cautious defiance. Among them, the spectre of Mayor Elias Marrow hung like a silent judge, his absence a heavy presence that permeated every corner of the room. Clara's hand tightened around the folder she carried, the evidence within a stark testimony to the betrayals and broken oaths that had bound this community in silence. She felt the familiar stirrings of doubt and guilt, shadows of her own past losses echoing in the gravity of the moment. Yet, beneath it all, an iron resolve took hold. This reckoning was necessary, no matter the cost. Maggie Thornton, the town's innkeeper and reluctant historian, leaned in slightly as Clara passed her a glance. There was a flicker of something unspoken in Maggie's weathered, reluctant respect, tempered by fear. The alliance forged between them was fragile but vital, a beacon in the encroaching darkness. Deputy Sam Collins stood nearby, shifting uneasily in his worn uniform. His loyalty to the town was palpable, yet his eyes betrayed the conflict raging within. Clara knew his position was precarious, caught between the old guard he had long served and the unsettling truths she was unraveling. His allegiance could tip the balance of the unfolding drama. As Clara cleared her throat and began to speak, the room fell into a heavy silence, her voice steady despite the tremor of tension in the air. Laid bare the evidence of manipulation and betrayal, the hollow promise Mayor Marrow had crafted as a mechanism of control, now unraveling before their eyes. The elders exchanged glances, their carefully constructed facades cracking under the pressure of exposure. Accusations hung thick in the air, mingling with fear and suppressed rage. The town's veneer of unity splintered, revealing the fractured loyalties and buried guilt that had long festered beneath the surface. Clara could feel the room closing in, the consequences of her revelations rippling outward like shockwaves. Questions and denials volleyed back and forth, the elders desperate to maintain their grip on the narrative, even as the truth threatened to topple the fragile order they had maintained. Clara met their resistance with unwavering determination.